Welcome back to a special episode of To The Point. Gentlemen, let's now come to Mr. Modi and the way he's handling what is clearly the biggest crisis his government has faced. Dushyant Dave, Mr. Modi's foreign minister, the chief minister of Rajasthan, and a three-time BJP MP Dushyant Singh all face serious questions of moral propriety, to put it at the least. Yet Mr. Modi himself is silent, almost invisible in fact. Is that an acceptable way for the Prime Minister to handle this crisis?
Well, I don't think this is the way that BJP as a party, and a responsible party, or much less the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, who is quite, keen about purity in public life, should have handled. And most of all, I may like to remind the BJP today that they all swear by Lord Ram. And it was when a Dhobi had made allegations against Sita, then Ram really asked her to undergo a test. So it's like Caesar's wife should be above suspicion. I think it would be absolutely perfectly justified for the Prime Minister to ask both Ms. Swaraj and also Ms. Raje to first resign and prove themselves, as they have done, insisted in the past when Congress ministers had faced allegations rightly. So I think this silence is really not very healthy for a democracy, and certainly not the kind of a public life that Prime Minister Modi had promised us to build.
Enram, in the interview that Mr. Modi gave the Tribune just a couple of weeks ago, he said that his claim, "Achhe din I have arrived," was based on the fact that the old days of corruption and scams was over. The present situation clearly proves that's not the case. So does this crisis also cast a shadow over the Prime Minister's credibility?
Absolutely, because he spoke so soon, and by his conduct now has shown that he's not serious about fighting corruption, and fighting, in this case, ministerial misconduct as well, possibly criminal misconduct. In the case of Sushma Swaraj, and already Mr. Dave has made clear what he thinks the legal position is, or the legal future is for Vasundhara. So I think, this is inept management, and it will damage Prime Minister Modi's political credibility. He's got to get off his high horse. I don't know how he's going to tackle it, but silence is clearly not the answer to the crisis.
The problem, Kumar Ketkar, is that if you look at how the Prime Minister has handled the sort of problems, some of them were serious, some were not that serious, he seems to believe that silence is the right strategy because he hopes that the problem will then blow away. That's what he did right through the Love Jihad campaigns of last summer. Initially, that's how he responded to the conversion crisis of earlier this year, until he was virtually forced by events to speak out. And now he's doing it again over Sushma Swaraj and Vasundhara Raje Sindhya. Do you think that this crisis now can blow over if the Prime Minister keeps quiet and keeps his fingers crossed?
Let us not mistake speechlessness with silence. I think he has nothing to say. He cannot say anything, therefore he is silent. It is not a strategy of being silent. He is speechless because he doesn't realize from where the ball has hit him. And I think personally that I never thought him to be an extremely credible and moral person. He wanted the world to perceive him as credible and moral, and his entire campaign was built around that so-called credibility and so about morality. But actually the crisis was there within the party, and there were so many immoral or immoral acts being done during the campaign, after the campaign, and during last 1 year. But this proved to be the largest single crisis, and that's why we are discussing it. And I don't think that he can threaten Sushma with sacking, nor he can ask mildly, compassionately, Sushma to resign, because if that happens, Pandora's box is open and so many other things will start coming out, because then Sushma's camp, which is obviously Sushma's camp, is not completely empty. There are people there, and those people are going to counterattack. So it is not only a moral issue, it is a political issue, it is a party issue, and how to deal with the party. Prime Minister has appointed his own man as president of the party, but both of them don't know how to deal with the party, completely faction-ridden and feuds.
You know, Ajay Kumar, the Prime Minister likes to present himself as a strong, decisive leader. But the one quality that strong, decisive leaders have is that they can act decisively and act quickly. Here, the Prime Minister is either paralyzed, if you're being unkind, or at least he seems to be indecisive if you're being a bit understanding. Neither of which are the qualities you expect of a strong, decisive leader. Do you think this episode, and I'm sure you do because you're the opposition, but do you think this episode is going to damage or dent that impression that we have that Narendra Modi is strong and decisive?
You know, Karan, this Prime Minister has been known for being an excellent communicator. So and he's been talking on the yoga asanas, and also his shavasana kind of silence is actually very intriguing. But like Kumar Ketkar and everybody else says, a Prime Minister who knows what is the clothes the ministers are wearing, who micromanages or is a very powerful Prime Minister, we are quite sure that he knew about these developments. So the needle of suspicion is slowly moving towards the Prime Minister, and correctly said, you would like to get this impression across this country that probity in public life. We are very sure that Mr. Narendra Modi and the Bharatiya Janata Party has lots of skeletons and a lot of explanation to do. And in Ms. Sushma Swaraj's case, they are scared that the moment the issue, that if they take any action against her, the whole thing will blow in their face.
Can I interrupt?
So the fact is that the Prime Minister is silent. Sorry, go ahead.
Are you suggesting that when you say the Prime Minister knew about all of this and is not acting, that there's a measure of complicity in the Prime Minister's refusal to act, perhaps even in his silence? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, because Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, if we base on the newspaper reports in the public domain, had informed him 10 days before, because the story was brewing. So he knew about it. He was very much aware of it, definitely, when she told him. And a Prime Minister who knows which minister is wearing which clothes, it's very hard to believe that the External Affairs Minister went to such an extent, speaking to a British counterpart, speaking to British members of Parliament, and the Prime Minister being totally in the dark is really, really difficult for a Prime Minister who says, I know everything, which his people say that they know, he knows everything in every ministry.
I can understand your desire as an opposition leader to want to speculate, but let's limit the speculation because we don't want to come close to some form of libel as a result. Let me go, Dushyant Dave, raise this with you. In most Western democracies, leaders usually aim to nip a problem in the bud so that it doesn't get worse. Mr. Modi seems to be arguably doing exact opposite. He's actually letting it grow into a full-blown crisis. And this is clearly the impression that's been created by his silence, sometimes by what people call his invisibility. Could he end up with a worse problem because he wasn't swift and prompt in tackling it?
Look, on a high moral platform that Mr. Modi really won the election, and it was really, even for a person who has never been fond of Mr. Modi as a political leader, I really had hoped that he would fight corruption, because Congress had really decentralized corruption. There's no doubt about that. So one really expected Mr. Modi to act, and his silence today is deafening to right-thinking people in the country. Coupled with that, there is a little serious issue. The government is today trying to deflect the controversy by, suddenly overnight raising these cases against Mr. Shankar Singh Waghela and Mr. Veerbhadra Singh. Now, don't please misunderstand me, because, if they are guilty, they must face. But the timing of this really raises very serious doubts in my mind as to what government wants to do. So I think it's really very funny that the way the Prime Minister is reacting to it, it's really, I would say, unbecoming of him or unexpected of him, frankly, as a leader who really promised us a complete cleansing of the politics in this country.
And Ram, let me put an opposite point of view to you. Is it possible that the Prime Minister is hesitant to act at the moment because Congress has taken such a strong, repeated stand demanding the resignation of both Sushma Swaraj and Vasundhara Raje Scindia, that if he were to now act, it would look as if he was doing so under pressure, and that at all costs he wants to avoid. So is this a result of, in fact, the high campaign Congress is waging?
I think that could be a factor, but although I disagree with the Congress on many things, I think they acted, the demand was sound. The demand was sound because they caught on to the gravity of the misconduct here. And by the way, Karan, the Prime Minister was clearly in the know at least a couple of days before the story really broke in India, because, as you know, the Sunday Times of the UK had all the relevant facts. That's the, once Keith Vass's emails were hacked, the story became almost full-blown, but it took a couple of days before it reached India. So in that period, clearly, the Prime Minister, I presume, I would bet that the Prime Minister was briefed on the matter at that point, and therefore he's guilty of a cover-up.
We have Dilip Patgankar. We'd lost the connection to him earlier, as you may have seen, but he's back there. Dilip, I want to put a particular specific point to you, and it's to do with the question, is Sushma Swaraj arguably in breach of Section 13(1)(d)(3) of the Prevention of Corruption Act? I'm going to read that small section to you, and having read it, I'm going to ask you, Dilip, whether you think Sushma Swaraj has possibly breached it. This is what it says. A public servant is said to commit the offence of criminal misconduct if he, while holding public office as a public servant, obtains for any person any valuable thing. And arguably, a British travel document is a very valuable thing. And then this section says, without any public interest. Arguably, no public interest is served by helping Lalit Modi get a British travel document. So is Mrs. Swaraj guilty of giving someone, Lalit Modi, a very valuable thing without any public interest?
Karan, I am not a legal person and I cannot comment on that. All I can tell you is both in terms of propriety and in terms of the political fallout, it is clear that something was amiss in this relationship between Sushma Swaraj and Lalit Modi. But if you permit me, Karan, I'd like to come back on the question you've been asking regarding the Prime Minister's silence. You see, unlike in the case of Sushma Swaraj, this time, as far as Vasundhara Raje is concerned, senior ministers of Mr. Modi's government are silent, the party president is silent, the spokespersons are silent, the RSS people are silent. What does this silence really amount to? Why are they suddenly so speechless? And that tells me that things are far, far more serious within the party. And then probably I'm off on a tangent and you'll pardon me, but suddenly you find an interview that Mr. L.K. Advani gives to the Indian Express, and where he speaks about anti-democratic forces gaining ground in the country. Whom was Mr. Advani targeting? Who did he have in mind? So there are, lots of things that are happening. And of course, piecing this puzzle together is difficult. But I think more of this is going to happen in the next few hours and days. As far as the question about whether Sushma Swaraj can be charged under that particular article that you read me, truly, I have no opinion.
Let me bring you in, Ajay Kumar, on that specific question about whether Sushma Swaraj has breached Section 13(1)(d)(3) of the Prevention of Corruption Act. On prima facie reading, it looks as if she has, because she has granted or helped obtain a very valuable thing, which is a British travel document for Lalit Modi without any public interest. But this is not an issue that I've heard the Congress party raise at all. So I wonder why this is not an issue you've raised when you've held so many press conferences at such length and in such detail. Why have you not raised this issue?
Karan, I think, you must have, either you missed that press conference because we specifically mentioned Money Laundering Act, Prevention of Corruption Act, Section 172, Section 174, Section 170, Criminal Conspiracy 120B in a press conference.
Forgive me, Mr. Kumar, I'm interrupting. I'm talking about Section 13(1)(d)(3). The sections you mentioned in your press conference are all interpretable and the interpretation could differ. This section, 13(1)(d)(3), I'm just going to repeat it for the audience and for you, is very specific. It says, and I'm quoting, a public servant is said to commit the offence of criminal misconduct if he, while holding public office as a public servant, obtains for any person any valuable thing without any public interest. And the point is this: the British travel document that Mrs. Swaraj helped Lalit Modi obtain is clearly a valuable thing, and it's clearly without any public interest, which is why I ask, why hasn't your party raised this specific section?
So, Karan, I believe what you have cited is absolutely right, so I'm not going to contest that. if we have missed it out, we definitely take that as a feedback. I mean, and we need to bring it. It's not missed because of any other reason. And we will raise it as soon as this, tomorrow's briefing or whatever it is, and it's a valid section. It should have been raised, and we take your feedback on it. But it was missed, not totally as something which we may have overlooked.
All right. Dushyant Dave, can I, as a lawyer, ask how you view this situation, or is it a question that you would not want to answer?
You know, I won't directly answer that because, I mean, I would like to really steer clear of this controversy involving Ms. Sushma Swaraj, particularly for personal reasons. But having said that, let me say one thing. This is a little important for the country to know that Mr. Lalit Modi is a fugitive today. He is accused of serious malpractices, illegalities and criminalities in this country. So it would have been absolutely, inappropriate for anybody to have really touched him, even with a barge pole.
Okay.
In fact, if you recall, Mr. Arun Jaitley and had himself as BCCI, part of the BCCI committee, found certain gross improprieties against Mr. Lalit Modi. Now, all these facts really tell us, and I personally know of one particular case of BCCI IPL contract to one of the television companies, in which more than 500 crores of rupees have been siphoned off in one go. So all these issues really raise very serious allegations against Mr. Modi. It is therefore really inappropriate. It is really unacceptable for anybody in public life to touch Mr. Modi, much less help him in any possible manner. So it really is a serious issue.
I agree with you completely. Let me come to Kumar Ketkar, and I want to come back to that issue of whether what Mrs. Swaraj has done falls under this particular section 13(1)(d)(3) of the Prevention of Corruption Act. I'm going to make it a very simple question. And the question is this: has there been any public interest that's achieved by helping Lalit Modi obtain a British travel document? Or is it without public interest? Answer that for me, Mr. Ketkar.
Absolutely no public interest is served, and this should have been known irrespective of what the clauses are, because when Lalit Modi fled this country in 2010, even at that time everybody knew that he was a criminal, and everybody knew what the IPL was. IPL was becoming a big scam, and even otherwise, even if she was not a foreign minister, even otherwise, to keep in touch with Lalit Modi at that point of time, any time between 2010 and 2014, could have been attributed as some kind of nexus, and that nexus could have been certainly immoral. Now it is illegal and also amoral. So I don't understand how come Sushma Swaraj commit such kind of an impropriety, because this is not impropriety, this is a nexus, this is a vested interest nexus, and that vested interest is not some kind of an inference, but actually provable inference, and therefore I think what she has done, or what Vasundhara has done, he is completely criminal, either on the legal side or even on the moral and political side.
Enram, perhaps the strongest point that Mr. Modi made in his campaign, where he won 282 seats, was his promise to eradicate corruption. It was a message that rang out very forcefully, and it was a message that every Indian who voted for him and many others who didn't accepted and looked forward to. Now, when there is arguably a case for saying that his foreign minister is guilty of breaching the Prevention of Corruption Act, and if after that the Prime Minister is silent, does not take any action, does not do anything, what does that say about his entire campaign that I will eradicate corruption? Where does it leave that important message that he sent out to us?
Karan, yes, that was the strongest message for the BJP in the context of the end of a very corruption-ridden UPA regime, Congress-led regime. So it had a powerful effect around the country in the election in particular. And from a common sense standpoint, what you said, Sushma Swaraj's conduct falls very much squarely within section 13(1)(d)(3), as you pointed out. Possibly you discovered it by a close reading of the Prevention of Corruption Act, which is why it hasn't been raised much before. But clearly this. But please read this along with, we must read this along with some of the questions former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram raised about who took the decision not to appeal and so on. He raised 7 questions. I've looked at them closely, and I think they're very relevant in this particular context.
Absolutely.
So read along with those factors, it looks very bad for Sushma Swaraj and for the BJP and for the Modi government.
Ajay Kumar, I'm going to go back to you.
The longer they delay acting on it, the better for the opposition.
Ajay Kumar, I'm going to go back to you. I'm going to ask you a short, sharp, simple question. I'm going to ask you in turn for a short, sharp, simple and clear answer. A moment ago you said that you would raise this issue, whether Sushma Swaraj is in breach of Section 13(1)(d)(3) of the Prevention of Corruption Act. Did you mean it, or was that simply the polite thing you say to anchors who are pressing you in television discussions?
Karan, we absolutely mean it, and you will hear from us tomorrow itself. So I can assure you of that absolutely. We will raise it, and we will. I can promise you from our end.
All right, Ajay Kumar, we'll wait and see whether you actually live up to that promise. My thanks to all my guests for joining me this evening. My thanks also to Dilip Padgaonkar, but unfortunately, once again, that Skype connection to Pune has broken. And there we end this particular episode. If you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye.